I'm going to teach you how to play the drums to Queen's We Are the Champions. Hi, welcome to today's vlog. Today's a bit of a different vlog. I'm going to be talking about these articles that have been cropping up really over the last few months, in fact years, where constantly classical musicians are talking about the difficulties, particularly in music education in the UK, but also I do see articles about it in the US media as well. And I just thought, as someone who has been a music teacher now for 15 years, someone obviously who went through the music education in the state sector in Britain, and also having taught in the private sector and the state sector, and predominantly now in tertiary education, so teaching university students or privately through my own private practice, kind of what I think about the music education crisis. Now, since the advent of the national curriculum in the UK, which some 30 years ago, of which I was kind of one of the guinea pig generation, one of those who were first exposed to it, music and the arts have basically been on a downward spiral. They've been less of a priority. In the private system, the arts are still thought of as a very important subject, and actually in a way something that these private schools can offer, which is kind of value added, something extra that you don't get in the state sector, which is a real shame because it means that kids that can't afford it don't have the opportunity. Now, to a certain extent, that's almost always happened. Really, if you wanted to be serious about music, well, particularly in my lifetime, you had to really go ahead and get private tuition. Now, my first exposure to school arts was, I think, aged around about 7, turning the pages for the bass guitar player at my dad's school production of Oliver. I don't really remember much more about it apart from him nodding his head and I had to turn the pages, and quite often I would miss the cue because I was too busy watching the action on stage. I remember doing a similar thing for my dad when it was The Wizard of Oz, and it just captivated me. It really, really did capture my imagination. Made me think, I want to be up on that stage doing that. I want to be performing. I want to be part of that. And I see that amongst my daughter particularly, but also other students, that kind of first fire in the belly. And I guess if you're watching this and you play an instrument, there'll be a point in your life where you can possibly pinpoint it accurately like I've done. Sorry, that's off a little bit. Or maybe it's more of a combination of things where you think, that was the point, or they were the points where I thought I wanted to do music, I wanted to be creative. But I think all of us, as I've said in other videos, especially this video here, we all want to make music and art. We all want to express ourselves. It's what marks us down as humans. Now, going back to my dad's school, I know that more or less every year during the 80s they always put on a show, but certainly as time moved forward, and I think by the time I got to sixth form, they'd all more or less stopped because the priority for the school was not enhancing the arts. The priority for the school was English, math, science, which I know are important, but not to the detriment of an education in the art. Now, at my primary school where I went to, a school called Stanner in Thornton Cleveland in Lancashire, you were in the minority if you didn't play an instrument in years 5 and 6. I didn't realise at the time that was highly unusual then, and now is almost impossible to find in the state sector. And that's because the deputy head teacher, was able to give up half an hour of his lunchtime every single day and an hour after school on a Friday in order to rehearse the school wind band. That then meant that the local high schools were always getting really, really good players. I mean, we played the music of Les Miserables when I was, you know, year 6, I was 10, 11, and we were playing music from Les Mis. I have to say as well, music education really comes down to music teachers as well. I mean, I was very, very fortunate. I had, you know, that teacher I told you about in my primary school who was so dedicated. He wasn't really a musician himself, but he was really, really dedicated to enhancing, you know, what we were doing as children. When I got to secondary school, there was an older lady there who was a music teacher who really didn't inspire me. And to put it this way, I'll give you the contrast between the guy who came in, John Bowen, who you heard me talk about before when I was in year 9, and her. We used to have to make our own drums or our own shakers out of rice. That was the height of her music education. With John, he bought a drum kit and said, right, kids, I'll teach you how to play the drums. Now, I'm telling you, which kids are going to be more interested? The ones that are having to do a shaker, which is kind of reception style, primary school stuff, or I'm going to teach you how to play the drums to Queen's We Are the Champions. And as well, I have to think about the guy who taught me A-level music, especially in lower 6, a guy called John Askew. Now, Askew, a rather quirk of history, one of his first classes that he taught in the Blackpool Grammar School, my dad was in his last ever class that he taught in the 6th form, I was in. There was only 3 of us, though, taking music A-level. We would join together with the upper 6 music class. And I learnt more in that 9 months with John Askew about lots of classical music. We did the classical symphonies, we did the Forshaw cello concerto. He was off the wall. He probably wouldn't get a place in a school these days because he was a bit too eccentric, played by his own rules, did all these different things. But as a teacher, as someone who was imparting you with knowledge and inspiring you to move forward, he was brilliant. See, I think one of the reasons we struggle to win the argument when it comes to music in schools is we're constantly talking about the benefit it's going to be to other subjects. There shouldn't need to be a benefit to music and the arts. It should just be music and the arts are really, really important. I mean, I think in the last 10 years, they've been the biggest growth industry in the UK. And is it 1 in 10 people now work in the creative industries? We shouldn't be having to make the argument that the creative arts are important to other subjects. Nobody sits there and says, hey, the maths might help you with your music. That's absolute utter rubbish. Music and the arts and drama, all that kind of stuff, should be able to be there on their own merits. They're important to kids. They're really, really important about developing your character. Still really enjoying the West Wing Weekly podcast. It's now got to the point where the podcast is now ahead of me, having been 1 mile behind me in my watching, so I need to try and catch up with what's going on. So I'm just listening to the live shows from London and Washington. A really, really, really good podcast.
Having quite fun.
Now, in my quest to lose weight, the one thing I've really not enjoyed missing out on is curry, but I've got better at cooking low-fat curries, and I'm going to show you how I cook one of my Dan's hot beef curries. Kind of just using basic ingredients. The only thing that's different from the basics is these guys' JD seasonings. It's a jalfrezi pot, but I'm going to mess around with it a little bit to make it a little bit more my own. But there's spice. You can mix the spices up together yourself, but I just find this a little bit more convenient. It's got turmeric, cumin, coriander, garam masala, chili powder, and a few others. I'll add my own chili powder, Kashmiri chili powder, and a little bit more, and I'll put the description for the recipe below if you really want to know, but here goes. And now into the oven for 2 hours, just let that beef really cook, really tender, and we'll see how it feels. Well, taste and not feels. Now we can go and play outside. The women in my life were moaning about the length of the beard, so I had to, after 7 weeks of growth, I decided to not totally go back to how it was, but certainly a little bit more Beckham-esque.
Check that we had English twice.
Now, speak to most saxophone players and they will tell you that they don't like their tone. In fact, finding a saxophone player who enjoys their own tone is often like finding a dog who speaks. Very rare. Me actually enjoying a track that I've played, thinking my tone's quite good, and it's like a dog who speaks Norwegian, even rarer. Thank you, Blackadder, for that little quote. But if you head down below to my Patreon page, it should be public, I think now. I posted earlier this week a recording of me playing Chelsea Bridge at a previous gig, and actually listening back to it, I was astonished that it was myself. I actually really enjoyed and thought the tone was absolutely nailed and spot on. So you're free to listen to that, but the root of all of that is always long tones. Long tones, long tones, long tones, you know. So much of what we need to do in order to improve our tone, the secret is found in practicing long tones. So many of the things that we need to do in order to get better are things that are not particularly interesting, and so there's no kind of way of glamming up. I mean, yes, you can play slow melodies, but really, if you really want to get good at improving your tone, it's long tones. But I've spoken about that so many times in the past. So make sure you check out this video here, and this is what I was up to this time last year. Thank you very much for watching. I will see you very soon. If you don't already, hit the subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.